Hi, folks. I'm Ensign Rowe, and I'm here to talk about the beauty of the quiet Star Trek episodes. Now, I've been a huge Trekkie all my life, so when I heard that Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard were being made, I was really excited. I haven't gotten around to season 3 of Discovery yet, but I've watched the first 2 seasons, and I've seen Picard, and I enjoyed watching them. But looking back on them after the fact, Discovery and Picard fall a little flat for me. I had to do some serious thinking to figure out why modern Trek shows just aren't quite my kettle of fish. Kettle of tea. Cup of tea? Right. Yeah, they're just not quite how I like my tea, which is Earl Grey. Hot, obviously. But I digress. The thing that bothers me about Discovering Picard is that although there are moments of humor and quieter beats, there are no quiet episodes. What do I mean by a quiet episode? I mean an episode where not all that much happens. The plot is very simple. There isn't a lot of action or drama or peril. The universe doesn't face an existential threat. The quiet episodes can be fun or heartwarming or heartbreaking, but they are all defined by a focus on character. Any sci-fi elements in the plot exist to support a character's story. Now, Picard and Discovery are, how shall I put this? Action first. The plots are crammed with twists and turns. The characters largely exist to further the plot, but the plot rarely exists to further the characters. So when the show tries to pull off a big emotional beat, it doesn't quite land because the shows haven't taken the time to develop the characters and their relationships. So if we're going to talk about a Star Trek show where plot does exist in service to the characters, what better place to look than Deep Space Nine? Lots of people remember DS9 for being dark and gritty and violent and action-packed. And it's true, DS9 did have war and corruption and Major Kira just double fist punching everyone she could get her hands on. Wow, she does do that a lot. She really does. But in the midst of plots involving, interstellar battles and politics and, Kai Wynn, DS9 at its heart is all about the characters. And the reason that the darker tones are so successful is because DS9 leavened them with humor and friendship and family, and yes, those quiet episodes. So without further ado, let's dive into a great example of a quiet episode. Season 3, Episode 22, Explorers. For those of you who don't remember this episode or haven't seen it, here's a quick synopsis. Now, Sisko has been discovering the ancient Bajoran legend that Bajorans used solar sailing spaceships to travel to Cardassia over 800 years ago. The Cardassians have long called this legend a whole bunch of baloney, and Sisko is determined to prove them wrong. So he builds one. And he asks Jake to come along with him on a father-son adventure. At first, Jake isn't too into this because he wants to spend time with his girlfriend, but he eventually decides to come along. The episode follows Jake and Sisko having some lovely father-son bonding time until their ship mysteriously jumps to warp due to this space current thingamadude called a tachyon eddy. After they drop back to sublight speeds, they discover that they are in the Cardassian system, and Dukat shows up and is like, wow, good job, guys. Also, huge coincidence. We just happened to find a crashed solar sailor on Cardassia that proves that the Bajorans did achieve interstellar travel before the Cardassians. And Sisko says, wow, what an amazing coincidence. And he and Jake have a great laugh about how stupidly arrogant the Cardassians are and how they basically just flip the bird at Dukat. And then Dukat sets off some space fireworks for them, and that's a wrap. Oh yeah, and then there's this cute subplot where the valedictorian from Dr. Bashir's medical school class arrives on the station. He's feeling insecure because he was only the salutatorian because, he mistook a pre-ganglionic fiber for a post-ganglionic nerve, whatever that means. Anyway, he gets drunk about it with Miles, and then he decides to talk to valedictorian lady, and guess what? She's actually super nice and thinks his research is cool, and then he feels better about life. The end. So, yeah, probably the most earth-shattering thing that happened in this episode is that Sisko finally finally gets to grow a goatee. So if nothing really happens in this episode, why is it such phenomenal storytelling? Well, the fact that there isn't much plot to this episode allows the writers to spend more meaningful time with the characters. In this episode, we get to see Sisko building the solar sailing ship. We've been told through exposition that Sisko used to be an engineer, and he actually helped design the Defiant. But to see Sisko the builder in action really reinforces that idea. And it's about this time that we get to see Sisko the wartime captain. That's what his character starts developing as. So seeing Sisko the Builder is a great way to keep his character well-rounded. We also get to see how his relationship with the Bajoran people is developing. He's determined, even borderline obsessed, with proving the legend of ancient contact between Bajorans and Cardassians. We get to see him becoming a part of Team Bajor, which is an important step on his journey towards accepting his role as emissary of the prophets. This is also a great episode for Jake. When we first meet Jake, he's Sisko's kid. He's a nice boy. He likes baseball. He's a good student. But now he's becoming an adult. He's discovered a passion for writing, and he's thinking about going away to school in New Zealand to study that passion. But more importantly, this episode focuses on the beautiful relationship between Sisko and his son. At the beginning of the episode, Sisko confides in Dax that he's worried that he and Jake are growing apart. Jake is growing up, and he doesn't need Sisko anymore. And that's painful for him to accept. So when they go on this trip together, we get to see them develop a new dynamic as two adults. Jake even tries to give his dad advice on women, saying, "Don't think of me as your son, just think of me as another guy." But even though Jake is growing up, he still turns to his father for advice on his writing. Even though Sisko was initially disappointed when Jake told him he didn't want a Starfleet career, we get to see him fully supporting Jake's dreams of becoming a writer. He even gives Jake advice about writing, telling him he should write from experience to make his work more authentic. So overall, this is a strong, heartwarming episode. We get to see Sisko one-up Dukat in the end, and that's always fun. But although Explorers is a stellar, standalone episode, it also works beautifully within a larger narrative. Jake and Sisko's experiences in this episode inform the decisions their characters make later on. They lend weight to the emotional beats in more dramatic, action-packed episodes. Take Jake's journey growing up to become a writer. In later episodes, we get to see Jake getting the experiences his dad referred to. He helps out Dr. Bashir at a besieged hospital, helping to treat casualties of war. He ends up on a ship of cadets that makes bad decisions in battle, getting most of them killed, and he uses these experiences to enrich his writing. Later on in the season 5 finale, when the Federation abandons DS9, Jake stays behind to write about the Dominion occupation. We get this absolutely chilling, shocking moment when it is revealed that Jake is still on the station. And Sisko's expression when he learns that Jake stayed behind is just heartbreaking. We get to see him make the decision to protect his crew by leaving his son behind, recognizing that Jake is a grown man who has to be allowed to make his own decisions. This is such a heavy, emotional moment because we have watched Sisko and Jake's relationship develop for years. Seeing them separated introduces the personal losses of war. Not only is the Federation abandoning DS9, but Sisko and his son are being torn apart, maybe forever. And that gives a tangible weight to the loss of the station. Another moment where the relationship between Sisko and Jake's coming of age, and Sisko's love for Bajor come into play is in the season 6 episode, The Reckoning. In this episode, one of the prophets, non-corporeal beings that the Bajorans worship as gods, takes over Major Kira's body, and a Pawwraith, which is basically an evil demon prophet type thing, takes over Jake's body. And the two of them engage in a prophesized battle called The Reckoning. Sisko has the scientific ability to stop the battle, yet he chooses to risk Jake's life to allow the reckoning to be completed. Now Jake survives, and all is well, but that doesn't change how hard this decision is for Sisko. In the end, his faith in the prophets and love for Bajor lead him to make this decision. But it's really hard to watch Sisko wrestle with this because we know how much he loves his son. Now let's compare this episode with the one in Star Trek Discovery Season 2, where Burnham is faced with the decision of whether or not to sacrifice Airiam, the cool kind of bionic lady, in order to stop Control, the evil artificial intelligence thing. Eventually, Commander Non makes a decision to sacrifice Ariam, and she gets spaced. Now, this scene is sad, sure. Ariam was pretty cool, and it's a bummer to see her die. But other than the tiny bit of backstory we get on her at the beginning of this episode, we didn't really know all that much about her. She was almost in like red shirt or disposable ensign territory. And we certainly didn't get any development of her relationship with Burnham. You can tell that the show is trying to amp up this emotional moment. There's dramatic music and filming, but that's not enough to stick the landing. Basically, Discovery didn't earn the anguish of this decision that Burnham has to make. It doesn't earn any real emotional weight for this moment. It feels completely different than the decision Sisko makes in The Reckoning. And that is because Discovery didn't invest in any quiet episodes. It didn't invest enough in its characters and the relationships between them. So it loses that sense of emotional depth. Now, I understand that DS9 had 7 seasons, 25 episodes apiece, which gave them ample time to have quiet episodes. And Discovery has only had 3 seasons so far, and there are maybe 14, 15 episodes each. But the pattern so far in the first 2 seasons has been to have this breakneck pace of complex, cataclysmic sci-fi plot, which is totally lacking in quiet episodes. And Picard largely did the same thing, with the exception of the episode Nepenthe, where we get to see like pizza oven dad Riker, and Troy actually gets to have some good dialogue for the first time in her life, and we get to see their kid Kestra, who's totally adorable. And that episode honestly makes season 1 of Picard for me, because it gives you a breath, it gives you character, it gives you that love and caring and investment in these people. But other than that, the quiet episodes just aren't there, and I think that that's a mistake. A story doesn't need to be flashy or filled with action or breathtaking special effects to be a good story. Sometimes the unassuming stories can be powerful too. And by dropping just a couple of the complex plot points in favor of the quiet episodes that really focus on the characters, modern Trek would add a lot more depth and punch to their storylines. Avery Brooks said that the greatest journey he went on playing Captain Sisko was being a dad to Jake. Sometimes a simple story about a father and son on an adventure called life is all you need. And that's why the quiet episodes are some of the best of Star Trek. That's a wrap on my first YouTube video. Feel free to comment, especially if you disagree with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a wonderful day.